The sterile lights of Research Station Omega-7 hummed in the darkness of space. Inside Laboratory 12, Dr. Krell-9 examined the small creature strapped to the medical table. The human infant was no more than 8 months old, with pale skin marked by injection sites and monitoring patches. Subject 7743 shows minimal response to the neural enhancement serum, Krell-9 reported into his data recorder. His 4 eyes blinked independently as he studied the readouts. Physical augmentation remains within baseline parameters. Disappointing. The Xylothian scientist had invested 6 months into this experiment. 6 months of carefully calculated injections, genetic modifications and cognitive stimulation tests. The human child should have been stronger by now. Faster. More intelligent. Instead, the infant simply stared at him with those strange round eyes that held neither fear nor understanding. Krell-9 had acquired the specimen from a destroyed human colony ship near the border worlds. It was perfect for testing. Young enough to modify, resilient enough to survive the initial procedures. The Xylothian Empire needed super soldiers, obedient weapons they could control. Humans seemed like ideal candidates. They bred quickly and existed in isolated pockets across the galaxy. Nobody would miss a few thousand test subjects. But this one had failed to meet expectations. The subject will be terminated, Krell-9 announced to his assistant, a younger Xylothian named Vextar. Prepare the disposal protocols. Vextar hesitated. Sir, the cellular regeneration data shows unusual patterns. Perhaps if we wait another. We do not have time for maybes, Krell-9 interrupted sharply. The High Command expects results within the year. This specimen is worthless. Load it into a containment pod and eject it through the waste disposal system. The assistant complied, though his movements were slow and reluctant. He carefully placed the human infant into a small metal pod designed for biological waste. The child made soft cooing sounds, its tiny fingers reaching toward Vextar's face. It does not even understand what is happening, Krell-9 said coldly. Proof of its inferior development. Seal the pod. The containment unit hissed shut. Through the transparent panel, the baby's face was visible for a moment before the pod was loaded into the ejection chamber. Krell-9 pressed the release button without ceremony. There was a mechanical clunk, a rush of pressurized air, and the pod shot out into the void of space. The infant drifted away from the station, tumbling slowly in the darkness. Inside the pod, the baby began to cry, but no sound traveled through the vacuum. The life support system was minimal, designed only to keep specimens alive during short transfers between facilities. It would fail within hours. Stars wheeled past the pod's window as it spun through the emptiness. The baby's cries grew weaker as the temperature dropped and oxygen levels fell. The child's enhanced metabolism tried to compensate, burning through energy reserves to keep vital organs functioning. Back on the station, Krell-9 was already preparing his next round of experiments. He had acquired 3 more human infants from a recent raid on a mining colony. Perhaps these would prove more successful. The failed experiment was already forgotten, just another statistic in his research logs. But in the drifting pod, something unexpected was happening. The serums Krell-9 had injected into the child's system were not failures. They were simply slower than the Xylothian scientist had patience for. Human biology worked differently than he understood. The modifications were taking root, weaving themselves into the infant's DNA in ways that would take years to fully manifest. The baby's crying stopped. His breathing slowed to barely detectable levels. His body entered a state that resembled hibernation, a last desperate attempt at survival. The pod's beacon light blinked weakly in the darkness, a tiny spark of red against the infinite black. Hours passed. The life support system failed completely. By all logical calculations, the human infant should have died. But humans rarely followed logical calculations. Commander Pyrath soared through the darkness between stars, his bronze scales reflecting the distant light of a red dwarf. His massive wings, made of crystalline energy rather than flesh, propelled him effortlessly through the void. The Draconi had no need for ships when traveling short distances. Their bodies were born for the cosmos itself. His patrol route took him through the outer edges of Conclave territory, where few dared to venture. It was peaceful work usually. Boring even. But today his sensory organs detected something unusual. A faint energy signature, weak and fading, coming from a small object tumbling through space. Pyrath changed course, his curiosity piqued. As he drew closer he saw it was a metal pod, clearly of Xylothian design. His lips curled back, revealing rows of sharp teeth. The Xylothians were notorious for their unethical experiments. Whatever was in that pod was likely another victim of their cruelty. He caught the pod gently between his clawed hands, each the size of a human adult. The metal was cold, nearly frozen. Through the viewing panel, Pyrath saw something that made his heart skip a beat. A tiny creature, pale and still, covered in strange markings. It looked like a human infant, though he had seen few humans in his 300 years of life. The child was not breathing. Pyrath did not hesitate. He wrapped the pod against his chest, where his body heat was strongest, and flew at maximum speed toward the nearest conclave outpost. His wings blazed with urgency, leaving a trail of light across the darkness. He had seen death many times, but something about this small, helpless being stirred a protective instinct deep within him. 20 minutes later he crashed through the docking bay of Outpost Pyraxis 3, startling the guards on duty. "Medical assistance immediately," he roared, his voice echoing off the crystalline walls. The Draconi medical team worked with practiced efficiency. They extracted the infant from the pod and placed him in a regeneration chamber filled with healing energies. The child's body temperature was dangerously low. His heartbeat was almost non-existent. The scars and injection marks covering his tiny body told a grim story. "He has been experimented on," the chief medic said, her green scales darkening with anger. "Genetic modifications. Chemical enhancements. This is Xylothian work." "Will he live?" Pyrath asked, surprised by how much the answer mattered to him. "Perhaps. Human children are remarkably resilient. But he needs more than we can provide here. We must take him to the matriarch." 3 days later, Pyrath stood in the grand hall of Pyraxis Prime, the Draconi homeworld. The infant floated in a portable medical field before Emberis the Ancient, the oldest and wisest of their kind. Her scales shimmered with colors that had no name in any human language, shifting with her emotions and thoughts. Emberis studied the child for a long moment, her ancient eyes seeing beyond the physical form. The gathered clan members whispered among themselves. Some argued the child should be given a peaceful death, spared from whatever horrors the Xylothians had planned. Others wanted to investigate who had done this and deliver justice. But Emberis raised one massive claw for silence. "I sense something within this little one," she said, her voice like distant thunder. "A strength that has not yet awakened. A will that refused to break even in the face of death itself." She turned to face the assembled clan. The Xylothians sought to create a weapon. They believed they had failed. But they did not understand what they had truly made. This child survived what would have killed most beings. He drifted in the void with no air, no warmth, no hope. Yet his heart still beats. Emberis lowered her great head until her snout nearly touched the medical field. "I invoke the right of claiming. This child is now of my bloodline. He shall be raised as Draconi, taught our ways, given our protection. And when he is grown, the galaxy will learn what it means to underestimate the forgotten experiment." The child's eyes opened for the first time in days. They were brown, bright, and full of life that should not have been possible. A tiny hand reached upward as if trying to touch the dragon's face. "Your name shall be Ashborn," Emberis declared. "For you have risen from the ashes of death itself." 15 years had passed since Emberis claimed the human child. Ashborn stood in the training arena, sweat dripping down his face as he faced Commander Pyrath. Unlike the massive Draconi around him, Ashborn looked fragile and small. But appearances were deceiving. Pyrath lunged forward with a practice blade, moving faster than most beings could track. Ashborn twisted sideways, his body reacting before his mind fully registered the attack. The blade whistled past his ear, missing by inches. He rolled under Pyrath's next strike and came up behind the dragon warrior, tapping his training sword against Pyrath's back leg. "Point to the hatchling," Pyrath announced with pride in his voice. Several young Draconi watching from the arena edges chittered with excitement. They had grown up alongside Ashborn, and to them he was simply their strange-looking brother who could not breathe fire or fly. But Ashborn could do other things. Things that amazed even the ancient Draconi. After training, Ashborn walked through the crystal gardens of Pyraxis Prime. His adoptive mother, Emberis, waited for him beside a fountain of liquid light. Even at 20 years old, he barely reached her forearm when she lowered herself to his level. "You are troubled, my son," Emberis said softly. Ashborn sat on the edge of the fountain. "I saw my reflection in the water today. Really saw it. I look nothing like anyone here. My skin has no scales. I have no wings, no claws. When the hatchlings play, they soar through the clouds. I can only watch from the ground. Yet you accomplish things they cannot," Embers reminded him. You survived the Trial of Flames last month. No non-Draconi has ever done such a thing. The Trial of Flames was a coming-of-age ritual where young Draconi flew through a river of stellar fire. It should have been impossible for Ashbourne. But he had sealed himself in a heat-resistant suit and used a jump pack to navigate the flames. When he emerged, singed but alive, the entire clan had roared their approval. I cheated, Ashbourne said quietly. I used tools instead of natural ability. You adapted, Embers corrected. That is not weakness. That is the strength of your species. Humans do not have our natural powers, so they create solutions. They refuse to accept limitations. Ashbourne had been studying everything he could find about humans in the Conclave archives. Earth, the human homeworld, was thousands of light years away. Humans were scattered across hundreds of colony worlds, most of them barely aware of each other. They had no unified government, no great empire. To most advanced species, humans were insignificant. Yet the more Ashbourne learned, the more fascinated he became. Humans built cities on worlds that should have killed them. They survived disasters that wiped out other species. They created art, music, and stories that spoke of hope even in darkness. One story particularly captured his imagination. It was about a bird called a phoenix that burned to death and was reborn from its own ashes. Embers had chosen his name well. Mother, Ashbourne said suddenly, what if the experiments the Xylothians did to me are why I can do unusual things? Last week I held my breath underwater for 30 minutes. Normal humans cannot do that. And when I fell from the high tower during training, I broke 3 bones, but they healed in 2 days. Embers had suspected this for years. The Xylothians tried to make you into a weapon. They failed because they could not break what was already unbreakable. Your human spirit combined with their enhancements has made you unique. Before Ashbourne could respond, an alarm echoed across the city. Pyrath rushed into the garden, his scales flickering with urgent colors. Matriarch, we have received a distress signal. A human colony is under attack by Xylothian raiders. They are taking prisoners for experimentation. Ashbourne stood immediately, his hands clenching into fists. His heart pounded with something he had never felt before. Rage. Pure, burning rage. Those were his people out there. People who looked like him. People who were suffering the same fate he had barely escaped. I want to help them, Ashbourne said, his voice steady despite the fire in his chest. I want to stop the Xylothians from doing to others what they did to me. Embers looked at her adopted son, seeing the warrior he had become. Then it is time you learned where you came from and why you are truly here. The ship's Cinderwing slipped through the darkness like a shadow. Ashbourne stood on the bridge, surrounded by his hand-picked crew of Draconi warriors. Pyrath served as his second-in-command, while 3 younger Draconi handled navigation and weapons. They had trained together for months, preparing for this mission. We are approaching the coordinates, announced Syrax, the navigator. Her silver scales gleamed under the console lights. The research station is just ahead. Ashbourne's stomach tightened. According to the stolen Xylothian data files, this was Research Station Omega-7. The same station where he had been experimented on as an infant. The same place where Dr. Krell9 had declared him worthless and thrown him away to die. Scanning for life signs, Pyrath reported. I detect 43 Xylothians and 17 prisoners. Most are human children. Some are other species. 17 children. 17 lives hanging in the balance. Ashbourne forced himself to breathe slowly, the way Embers had taught him. Anger was a weapon, but only if controlled. We go in silent, Ashbourne ordered. Disable their communications first. I want them isolated before they know we are here. The Cinderwing docked with the station using stolen access codes. Ashbourne led his team through the airlock, moving with practiced silence. The station's corridors were exactly as he remembered from the data files. Clinical. Designed for efficiency, not comfort. They encountered the first guard near Laboratory 5. The Xylothian barely had time to reach for his weapon before Pyrath's tail knocked him unconscious. They bound him and continued forward, leaving no trace of their presence. As they moved deeper into the station, Ashbourne heard something that made his blood run cold. The sound of a child crying. Then another. And another. The sounds came from Laboratory 12. Ashbourne's hands trembled as he opened the door. Inside, rows of medical tables held small figures. Human children, alien younglings, all marked with injection sites and monitoring devices. They looked at him with eyes that held too much pain for their young ages. One little girl, perhaps 6 years old, whispered, "Are you here to hurt us too?" "No," Ashbourne said, kneeling beside her table. His voice was gentle despite the fury burning in his chest. "I am here to take you home." Pyrath and the others began carefully removing the children from their restraints. Some were too weak to walk. The Draconi carried them with surprising gentleness, their massive claws cradling the small bodies like precious treasures. Then Ashbourne saw the central computer terminal. He downloaded every file, every record, every piece of evidence. What he found made his blood turn to ice. The Xylothians were not just experimenting on individuals anymore. They were developing biological weapons. Viruses designed to target specific species. The next phase of their plan involved releasing these weapons on both human colonies and Draconi worlds. "We need to leave now," Syrax warned through the communication link. "I am detecting incoming ships. Xylothian reinforcements." But Ashbourne was not finished. He found Dr. Krell-9 in the main laboratory, reviewing data on a holographic display. The Xylothian scientist looked older, but his eyes held the same cold calculation Ashbourne remembered from the stolen security footage. Krell-9 turned and saw Ashbourne. For a moment, confusion crossed his face. Then recognition dawned. "Impossible. Subject 7743 died 15 years ago." "You were wrong about many things," Ashbourne said quietly. He moved forward, faster than Krell-9 could react, and grabbed the scientist by his lab coat. "You thought I was worthless. You thought humans were weak. You thought nobody would care about the lives you destroyed." Krell-9 struggled, his 4 eyes wide with fear. "You are the proof that my experiment succeeded. You should thank me." Ashbourne wanted to hurt him. Every fiber of his being screamed for vengeance. But Empress had taught him something more important than revenge. "Honor. I am taking you prisoner," Ashbourne said. "You will stand trial before the Conclave. You will answer for your crimes. And the galaxy will know what the Xylothian Empire has done." As they evacuated the station, Ashbourne set the self-destruct sequence. The children were safely aboard the Cinder Wing. Krell-9 was bound in the holding cell. And the evidence of Xylothian crimes was secured. Before they jumped to hyperspace, Ashbourne recorded a message and transmitted it to Xylothian High Command. His face filled the screen, calm but unmistakable in its threat. "My name is Ashbourne. I am the experiment you threw away. I am coming for all of you." The War Council chamber on Pyraxis Prime held representatives from 2 species who had never formally met before. On one side stood the Draconi elders, their scales shimmering with ancient power. On the other side stood human colonial governors and military commanders, looking small but determined. Ashbourne stood between them, the living bridge between 2 worlds. "The Xylothian Empire has declared war on both our peoples," Ashbourne explained, gesturing to the holographic display. "They plan to deploy biological weapons across dozens of worlds simultaneously. If we fight separately, we will lose. Together, we have a chance." Admiral Chin, a weathered human commander, studied the Draconi with barely concealed awe. "Our species has legends about dragons. We thought they were just stories. Now you are asking us to fight alongside them." Empress lowered her massive head to meet the Admiral's eyes. "And we have heard tales of human stubbornness and courage. Tales we thought were exaggerated. Yet here stands my son who survived what should have killed him and became stronger for it. If one human can earn the respect of the Dragon Conclave, imagine what our peoples can accomplish together." The alliance was formed that day. Within weeks, joint strike teams were training across multiple worlds. Human tactical flexibility combined with Draconi raw power created something the Xylothians had never encountered before. Ashbourne led the first major assault on a Xylothian weapons facility. His team consisted of 3 Draconi warriors and 5 human special forces soldiers. They moved through the facility like a coordinated storm. The humans used their smaller size to infiltrate tight spaces and disable security systems. The Draconi provided overwhelming firepower and protection. When they encountered a locked vault containing bioweapon samples, it was human explosives expert Rodriguez who shaped the perfect charge. When Xylothian reinforcements arrived, it was Pyrath who held the corridor, his crystalline wings creating an impenetrable shield while the team escaped. News of the alliance spread across the galaxy. Other species watched in amazement as humans and Draconi fought side by side, respecting each other's strengths and covering each other's weaknesses. The Xylothian High Command was baffled. Their intelligence reports had said humans were primitive and disorganized. The Draconi were supposed to be isolated and arrogant. How had these 2 species formed such an effective partnership? The answer was simple. They had underestimated both peoples. 3 months into the war, Ashbourne tracked Dr. Krell-9 to the Xylothian Bioresearch headquarters, a massive station orbiting their capital world. The scientist had escaped custody during a prisoner transfer and returned to his masters. Ashbourne infiltrated the station alone, using every skill the Draconi had taught him and every advantage his modified body provided. He moved through ventilation shafts too small for Xylothian guards. He held his breath for 20 minutes while hiding in a flooded maintenance tunnel. When guards shot him, his enhanced healing closed the wounds before he lost too much blood. He found Krell 9 in the central laboratory, desperately trying to complete his ultimate weapon. "You should have stayed dead," Krell 9 hissed, backing away. "You were a failure. A discarded mistake." "No," Ashbourne said calmly. "I was your greatest success. You tried to break the human spirit and make us into obedient weapons. But you cannot break what refuses to be broken. You cannot control those who choose their own path." Krell 9 lunged with a surgical blade, but Ashbourne was faster. He disarmed the scientist and held him against the wall. Every instinct screamed at him to end this, to make Krell 9 pay for all the suffering he had caused. But Ashbourne remembered the little girl in Laboratory 12, asking if he was there to hurt them. He remembered Emberus teaching him that true strength came from choosing mercy when vengeance was easier. "You will stand trial," Ashbourne said. "You will face justice. That is more than you ever gave your victims." The final battle came at the Xylothian home system. The combined human and Draconi fleet faced the Xylothian armada in a fight that would determine the fate of countless worlds. The battle raged for hours, ships exploding like stars across the darkness. Ashbourne boarded the Xylothian Emperor's flagship with a strike team. They fought through deck after deck until he stood before the Emperor himself, a bloated creature surrounded by guards. "You cannot win," the Emperor declared. "We are superior to both your species." Ashbourne smiled grimly. "That is what Krell 9 thought about me. He was wrong too." The fight was brutal but brief. Ashbourne's human determination combined with Draconi training made him unstoppable. When the Emperor fell, the Xylothian forces lost their will to fight. Within hours, surrender signals came from across their fleet. Months later, Ashbourne stood on a platform between human and Draconi delegations as they signed a formal alliance treaty. The rescued experimental victims had been given new homes among whichever species they chose. The Xylothian Empire was dismantled, its leaders awaiting trial. Emberus approached her son, pride radiating from every scale. "You have changed the galaxy, little one." Ashbourne looked out at the crowd of humans and Draconi standing together, once strangers, now allies. "No, mother. I just showed them what was possible when different peoples choose to see each other's worth." A human child and a Draconi hatchling played together in the garden below, laughing without understanding how remarkable their friendship was. That, Ashbourne thought, was the real victory. He had been experimented on, discarded, and left to die. But he had been found by dragons who taught him honor. He had bridged two civilizations and helped them see their common strength. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. And they would never forget the human raised by dragons who refused to let hate define him.